The issues of freedom and control are among the most misunderstood of your work. I would like to provide the learning behaviors of two children by way of example. One child's learning behavior is characterized by excessive dependence on the teacher at every stage of doing an assignment. The other child's learning behavior is characterized by an independence, an apparent love of learning on its own, a self-starting. Which child is the more free and which child is the more controlled?
You see, you phrased the question by referring to one child as dependent on the teacher and the other child is independent. He is independent of the teacher, but he's not independent of the natural world. He has already come under the control of the physical environment, which interests him. Rousseau raised this question 200 years ago. Rousseau didn't like personal dependence. He thought people harmed natural goodness. And so he wanted everyone to be dependent on things. But that's the point. You are dependent on the physical environment just as much as you are dependent on people. I think we would agree, I believe, that the child who is exploring the real world around him is farther advanced than the child who has to run to the teacher for approval. And the teacher, if he's any good, will make sure that child shifts his dependency to the world of things. Otherwise, the teacher would remain essential, and that we don't want. Every teacher has to wean the student, just as every therapist has to wean his client. You have to break up these dependencies. However, if a child is really not getting much reinforcement out of life, then a little parental or instructional approval will be enough to get the child going. But that should be withdrawn. You should break down the control exercised by another person and play up the control exercised by the environment.
Teachers today don't know how to shape the environment that shapes our behaviour towards sustainable social values. If they did, the education system would not be how it is today. For example, would they not be using punishment in an attempt to control behaviour? Controlling behaviour is one thing, shaping it positively is another. A lot of learning processes in schools today are utilised by a process called rote learning. This method adopts the action of repeating factual information in order to memorise what's been taught in a lesson. There is limited interactivity between students in a classroom setting like this. Most of all, it remains an uninteresting way of retaining information. How can creativity become nurtured if this is the main learning process taught to you in school? Textbooks open up to reveal all of the answers to the students without encouraging any line of questioning on the subject matter being explored. Therefore, critical thinking and the questioning of any information delivered is not encouraged. Everything is declarative in the school environment today and prohibits critical thoughts. Thinking is not driven by answers but by questions, so it is important to keep our focus on allowing questions to be asked. Critical and scientific thought is what has produced the technological marvels that we have today.
Collaborative learning is in short supply in our schools. More people working together on a given problem is a lot more efficient than segregating work to individuals in the classroom. It seems competition is an inherent characteristic in schools whereby grading systems and the categorisation of children into lower and higher classes or sets is the norm, without considering how such a framework can be socially damaging, because this can lead to a conditioning of unsustainable competitive behaviours. Too much emphasis is placed on pass or fail. Being wrong is seen as a flaw in the individual rather than an experiential learning process where being wrong about something could offer huge potential for improvement. Cultural studies and behavioural studies are rarely learnt in the current education system. Children have grown up with a conditioned, fixed value system without considering or relating to many of the different value systems. The more associations children can make from an early age, the better their ability to make decisions in life, especially if the information gained is of scientific and social relevance. Teachers do not have the correct tools to produce cooperative, social, scientifically intelligent, environmentally conscious people of the future. Today's system does not have sustainable goals in mind. It's not the fault of teachers, they're only caught up in an established education system. They are trained and shaped the same way our environment shapes all of us. Throughout this documentary film, we'll describe some of the solutions that could be implemented today, which will improve the education in many areas. The more intelligent our children, the better our lives and the richer our culture will be.
Teachers today are not adequately equipped with the tools that helps them understand how behaviour is shaped. For behaviour, science provides not only explanation and prediction, but also procedures for control. We can cause an event to occur or to assume certain consequences. The consequences of an individual's actions determines the likelihood of similar behaviour in the future. Positive consequences in turn produce student enthusiasm as well as success, which in turn motivates teachers to spend the time and effort that good teaching demands. Teachers are charged with a tremendous responsibility. They are tasked with enabling the next generation of youngsters to acquire whatever skills they will need for the future society. Learning is a change in behaviour as a result of interacting within one's immediate environment. Learning involves changes in thinking and other internal behaviours, as well as in overt actions such as writing an essay. Acquired behaviour differs from inherited characteristics. The most critical tendency people inherit is to adapt to the changing contingencies in their lives. Teaching is designed to bring about changes that serve both individual students in the long run and the society in which they live. Education is about building behaviour. Behaviour followed by a reinforcing consequence will increase in strength and the probability that it would occur again. Reinforcement must immediately follow or overlap the desired behaviour. The quicker, the more effective. The description of how the new behavioural science works sounds disarmingly simple and naive, and because of its simplicity, it's not too attractive to those who are seeking intellectual information. All animals, whether single-cell organisms or complex human beings, react to events in the environment. The techniques of behaviour modification are powerful, and they put a great burden of responsibility on those who are in a position to use them. We are products of what we have experienced throughout life, and we have no control over that. Teachers enter the field of education to help students become effective within society. All teachers thrive on student enthusiasm and achievement. They feel successful when they help a student succeed, and we want all teachers to feel this way.
We are part of the natural environment. Natural law controls us one way or another. Therefore, an education system based on how we relate to the environment in everyday life, as well as the natural laws which govern our surroundings, would further our understanding of sustainability and survival, because the further we distance ourselves from nature, the higher the likelihood of unsustainable practices coming about in society. Today, there is little evidence which demonstrates that schools communicate this scientifically logical train of thought. Competition has a very profound long-term effect on children becoming adults in society. Competition is deeply ingrained in our current social system and is an enduring part of our lives. It is time to look more closely at what it does to us. Empathic engagement is the most deeply collaborative experience one can ever have. Bringing out children's empathic nature in the classroom requires collaborative learning models. Unfortunately, the traditional classroom curriculum continues to emphasise learning as a highly personal experience designed to acquire and control knowledge by dint of competition with others. The way in which we conduct ourselves as a human species must be relevant and sustainable. Everything must be in accordance with natural law. Communication should be discussed with physical reference. Education, especially for children, must be structured towards shaping their behaviour that will produce these sustainable and relevant practices. Education must be geared towards the goals of society now and in the future. Some of these societal goals might be:
Teachers are getting better at using methods to allow children to think scientifically. More needs to be done in this area if our future children grow up to shape society into the goals we've just described. Learned behaviour is part of human nature. Even those who feel they are making their own decisions in life, despite their cultural indoctrination, have been influenced by their surroundings. This is why we fail to critically examine values and beliefs, and still adhere to myths, superstitions, and outdated customs which have little or no benefit to our survival. We have such little understanding about ourselves and the conditions that shape our behaviour. Thinking is not driven by answers but by questions. Had no questions been asked by those who laid the foundation for a field, for example, physics or biology, the field would never have been developed in the first place. Furthermore, every field stays alive only to the extent that fresh questions are generated and taken seriously as the driving force in a process of thinking. To think through or rethink anything, one must ask questions that stimulate our thought processes. Students do not need to become subject matter experts before they can start to learn to think critically in a subject. These things can proceed together, each helping the other. In science, we don't waste time teaching students things that scientists long ago disproved, but provide them with accurate and reliable knowledge so they will be able to practice logical and critical thinking from a sound premises.
One of the things about critical thinking skills is that they involve a part of the brain called the frontal lobe. This tends to be the last maturing system within the brain, typically comes online around the ages of 5 to 7, and is used extensively between 7 to 12. In terms of how the brain grows and develops, it grows on the principle of we build what we use. So in developing a child's critical thinking skills, what we want to do is use that system, use it as much as possible. Some of the ways we can help the child use this system is by how we approach and interact with them. Two important approaches to our children are the intent to understand and the intent to be with. The intent to be with is just wanting to be with your child and just enjoying your child. And it establishes the baseline for self-confidence and self-value. The intent to understand helps the child begin to understand and become self-aware of their own experience. So rather than just giving the child solutions, we help the child develop their own solutions with an intent to understand. which is a simple curiosity and caring about the child's experience from the child's point of view. I wonder what it's like to do this. I wonder what would happen, what do you think might happen with that? Isn't that interesting? So do you think you might, those sorts of questions and curiosity about the child's experience helps the child use that frontal lobe, use that critical thinking skills in terms of what they do. The other important thing about developing critical thinking skills and frontal lobe motivations is that critical thinking involves a set of motivations having to do with task-oriented and goal-directed activity. That particular brain system, as well as the other motivating system having to do with active exploratory learning, will not fully activate as long as relationship needs are pressing. And it goes beyond the scope of what I can get into here. But if the child has needs for relationship, for psychological connection, for love, affection, bonding sorts of issues, or is in emotional distress related to relationships, the other systems, particularly critical thinking and goal-directed activity and motivation systems, will not fully activate. So one of the most important things we can do for our kids to help activate the higher order thinking skills is to make sure that they're feeling safe and secure and loved in our families.
From birth, humans are naturally curious about their surroundings, as well as who they interact with in everyday life. Nurturing and maintaining this natural curiosity is a key element towards allowing creativity to flourish. In today's system, incentive to do things is primarily founded upon a monetary basis, whereby payment is given to someone for fulfilling a given task. However, in a social system which operates upon a natural curiosity as an incentive to do things, to create, to learn, to achieve new levels of understanding and awareness, motivation is then kept in line with the way human brains are wired from birth. Keeping in line with this means the future of society is maintained sustainably. Creativity needs to be encouraged in schools, because without creative individuals, we would surely be lacking in a lot of technological and artistic areas.
Hi, I'm Judy Willis, and I am a neurologist. I've been a neurologist for 15 years, and after the 15 years, my patient practice really changed. I started getting so many referrals for kids whose teachers thought they had ADD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, staring spell, seizures, petit mal epilepsy, and the increase was huge, and yet the kids had no greater incidence of it. And I saw the notes were coming from the schools, so I visited the schools. I'd look in the classrooms, and I saw kids who indeed were playing with everything they could find, staring out the window, coloring on someone's chair or book. The problem was that the way they were being taught was lectured. There were kids sitting in rows in first grade, just listening to information or filling out worksheets. And I know the brain goes into a state of stress from boredom. So it was my idea that I'd go to school, get a teaching credential, become a teacher, and I did it for the past 10 years. I taught 2nd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade, and applied what I know about the brain to the classroom, and found that just making subtle, easy changes that anyone could do got kids back in the state of voluntary behavior. And they learned easily, and they were successful. Their mindsets changed.
I'm a great people watcher, and been watching children playing games on computers, formally as research tasks and informally for a very long time. And there were some real surprises. One surprise, I think, is how they like to play with each other. And I remember a long way back in the 1980s, we asked children to design with us a game which would teach multiplication. And one of the many things they asked for was a game that they could play with their younger brother or sister, or their older brother or sister. They wanted to be able to compete with somebody who was less good than they were, or more good than they were. They wanted the ability to set the game to be a level playing field, because it was more fun. they enjoy playing with other children. They enjoy the dialogue, they enjoy watching. They enjoy the role of standing at the screen and seeing other people solve problems and then trying it themselves. They enjoy the dialogue. And I think games have become powerfully collaborative. Actually, that's the way most of their games are in the playground. It's nice to skip, but it's more fun to skip with two others. You know, this is play is always, I think, a social thing. One of the real surprises for us, I think, was that they like their games to be really hard, and that they enjoy the sense of what I like to describe as ipsative referencing, that sense of their own progress. They like to know that they're better than they were. You know, they're in their education, they're in a world of normative referencing, you know, are you as good as the others, criterion referencing, did you do as well as last year? That doesn't inspire them. What inspires them is, are you yourself doing better than you were? And how are your friends doing? That sense of self-progress, hugely powerful. And they don't get that very much in their education, you know, in their learning lives. They're locked in other people's judgment of how good they might be. In their game-playing life, there's no limit on that. They can be as good as they want to be. And one of the things we're going to learn for sure in this century is that we've got no idea really how good our children might be. For me, the gain has been the socialization. You know, seeing children actively engage. Do you know, there's something about a little screen that leads people to talk. You know, so I'm walking in across the streets of London today. There are tourists, of course, in the middle of London taking photographs. You watch them. They take a photograph, they all rush around the back of the camera and gather around the screen to chat about it. There's something very social about that little glowing screen that's very powerful. And I think now that the screen is a shared screen, the ability for children to work together is very powerful. And for me, that really matters because, look, to be blunt, the world's a little broken at the moment. You know, children are in desperate circumstances in parts of the world. I know that we can use technology to join children up in a way that helps them. I've seen that children that play together really want to kill each other afterwards. You know, there's something about delight in engagement and problem solving that can lead people out of the most desperate poverty. We can inoculate children against poverty with great technology. So there's something powerful about that social element that for me, doesn't matter what else games bring. That's so important. It's so important. Literally, the ability to heal the world with play is something we've never had before. Never had.
Roots of Empathy is a classroom program to help children become more competent, caring citizens today and more caring parents of tomorrow. It takes place over the course of a school year. We bring in a family from the community with an infant, and they visit on a regular basis.
Is she at the point where she's tasting different foods?
Food and anything that can get near her mouth.
And the children learn through observing this baby how babies feel and react to the world. And in turn, they learn about themselves. We teach students to recognize the individual temperament of their baby. The magic of this is that the children then learn very quickly their own temperament traits.
Children looking at me.
The Roots of Empathy program teaches children emotional literacy. That is, the ability to identify feelings and give them names.
Santa Claus holding a baby, that's what the picture's about. Now tell me, what do you think this baby's feeling?
Afraid.
Afraid?
Sad. Scared.
What's happening to make you think she looks scared or frightened?
She has a frown.
She has a frown. Why do you think this baby might be afraid?
She's scared of Santa Claus because Santa Claus is a stranger and she doesn't know him yet.
She doesn't know him yet.
The Roots of Empathy program focuses on the relationship of a parent and infant. And the reason we've taken that relationship to be the key teaching tool is because it is unparalleled as a motor for teaching and for learning. For example, if a baby cries, we explain a baby who cries is a baby who has a problem.
Why do you think a baby might cry?
And the adults in that baby's life have to figure out what the problem is and help the baby.
He cries. That's how he talks.
That's how he talks. You're right.
And this idea of problem solving is core throughout the Roots of Empathy program. The children problem solve what the problem is with the baby, and then they take that learning and they problem solve in their own relationships.
I did a book for Tikal, a pattern book. So we went through that.
The families who we invite to participate as Roots of Empathy families represent diversity.
Aaron, you like to listen to a song? Want me a song? Okay.
Our value is inclusion. We outreach to these families so that we can show that love comes in every color and in every language, and that there is room in our circle of caring for everybody. When children see care happening, it allows them to move to the next stage, which means identifying how their friends are feeling and responding to that.
How would your friend feel?
Yeah.
Exactly. So how can you feel sorry for him?
Having responsive friendships and relationships in the classroom. Building a caring community in the classroom.
Now think about Tikal.
With the grade 7 class, there was a lot of negative behavior, for example, like name calling. Some fairly serious racist and sexist, homophobic type name calling. But since we've had the Roots of Empathy program going in there, there's been a noticeable shift. We haven't had to deal with them around those negative issues.
Many of the teachers in Roots of Empathy classroom use many of the activities that we start under the name of Roots in many, many creative ways.
They've done a lot of work already.
So that Roots of Empathy classroom teachers extend the program is in as many ways as they are unique themselves.
Everything in the curriculum just connected. There's huge possibilities as far as tying it into what we're already doing.
When we do Roots of Empathy, the children are using language in many different ways.
We just connected to science. It brings out a lot of vocabulary too. We connected to the math program, social studies, talking about the different traditions and culture of the child.
They're doing problem solving.
It just crosses all the disciplines.
It helped me a great deal in that I'm able to continue with the thought of empathy in everything I do with the children.
At my last school, I just didn't like any of the people there. The teachers were more concerned with fulfilling their jobs and getting their money rather than trying to help the students learn.
In my old school, when I told them I was going to Summerhill, they were like, but you're not going to learn anything, you're not going to be going to any lessons, and I didn't really understand. And then when I came to Summerhill, I found that I did learn a lot more, because when I went to the lessons, they were the lessons that I wanted to go to.
In my stay at school, you had to be in lessons and you had to eat all of your lunch, and if you didn't, you couldn't leave the dining room. So I didn't do anything stupid or anything, I just did all the lessons, and I kind of felt under pressure about doing that.
I've been visiting schools all around the world. Nearly all of them have been influenced by Summerhill. Some of them are direct imitations of Summerhill. Kinokuni in Japan is based on Summerhill. Almost all the schools have heard of Summerhill, even if they aren't directly based on it. And there's even a school near Bangkok, which is for the children from the slums of Bangkok, that is based on the teachings of Neil.
I've never hesitated, I've never doubted the value of children being allowed to grow in their own way without being indoctrinated by religion or discipline or politics or anything else. And I've never even questioned that.
Aquaponics is a system for providing fresh fish and veggies and salads to the dinner table in a completely natural way. And it delivers the best quality food that's chemical free, and most importantly, you know where your food's coming from. Now, we think that this type of system is very important for school children because it deals with the natural food production system and brings them an understanding of how nature really works.
We've got floating thermometers in the ponds, we've got measurement taking place, there's science taking place with germination, there's language you can see with all the poems that are up, so the kids are having a ball.
To explain how the system works, well, when fish waste, or poo as the kids love to call it, is drawn up through the circulating pump, it's fed into a bed filled with expanded clay. Now, this bed's home to any number of edible plants, which quickly suck up the nutrient, filtering the water so it's clean. Now, the system is not just incredibly productive, it's also water efficient, with very little water lost, and the majority of that is only used by the plants anyway.
What we're doing is we're keeping a board now, and you can see the board in the background there, and we're actually putting the results down on a daily basis.
The methods for bridging the difference between nations that have totally different social systems, values, religious beliefs is relatively easy. You don't start out by attacking their religion, social customs, or beliefs. You only bridge the difference through areas that you have in common, not the differences. All the people on earth require clean air, clean water, arable land, and the necessities of life: food, clothing, shelter, housing, and good education. This is where the Venus Project comes in. This is what the Venus Project has to offer to all nations, the necessities of life. It does not touch religious beliefs or social customs. Right. By getting all the nations to join together in the reconstruction of the restoration of nature, the reefs, the oceans, the rivers, the waterways, cleaning them out and rebuilding the soil, rebuilding our reefs, all nations can agree to that. But if you start talking about men having 5 wives or this religion or that, you're not going to bridge the difference. Even if you go to war and convert them by religious force, you're not going to really change people. They're going to meet underground. So the bridge between different nations is what they have in common, not the differences. And that is food, clothing, shelter, clean air, environment. Is that clear? So if I went to, say, Saudi Arabia, and I was given any kind of opportunity there, I would lecture at their universities and talk to their university professors who are already halfway there. I would not talk to their political leaders. I talked to the university professors about commonality of the earth and its resources and bridging all those differences so that we need not require this territory for Germany, this territory for France. We can open up the earth so that all people can travel anywhere without passports, sharing the ocean's resources, not 12 miles out. When you give a country like Africa, say 12 miles offshore would be their territory, no other nation may fish in that area, they have paid off political leaders, you know, $500 to be able to fish in those waters. You understand what I mean? It doesn't work. Money buys off the leaders, and they sell out their country. It isn't really their country. They're opportunists. Most politicians are. And I'm sorry about that, but the real way to do it is concentrate on the areas you have in common. Children become knowledgeable, better behaved, well-informed, and everybody on earth grows at the same time.
What we're calling today social and emotional learning actually had many of its roots back in the 80s when kids were having lots of problems with things like drugs, unwanted teen pregnancies, dropouts, violence in schools. And the federal government mandated programs to prevent these things. There was a war on bullying. There was a war on drugs. There was a war on violence in schools. And about the time I, as a science journalist at the New York Times, was looking around at what I ended up calling emotional intelligence, about that time a foundation, the W.T. Grant Foundation, funded a study of all of these programs because people realized some of these programs work and a lot of them don't. And they wanted to know what's working. And so they did an analysis of the different components and so on. They realized that the programs that worked all shared a common set of ingredients. And what were they? They're helping kids become more self-aware. They're helping them manage their distressing feelings. They're helping them be more empathic, control impulse, make sound social decisions like, you know, how can I say no to drugs and keep my friends? And that essence has been extracted from those programs and brought to the classroom as social emotional learning. Today, they've completed a mega study of more than 200 independent analyses that look at kids who have these programs and kids who don't, comparable kids. And they find that if kids get the training in social emotional learning, that all pro-social behaviors, things like attendance, behaving well in class, liking school, they all go up about 9 or 10 percentile points. And the things that they're trying to prevent, you know, the drug use, the violence in schools, the bullying, all of that goes down by the same margin. And the real kicker, I think, is that academic achievement goes up 11 percentile points. And if you look at the difference between groups of kids who don't do well and groups who do, the difference in their achievement is in about the same range. I mean, this pretty much closes the achievement gap. And it works best for the kids who need it the most. So today, I think that the social emotional learning movement has the ammunition to go to the next level, really to take it to scale, to make it available to every kid.
If you look down the hill,
A rose.
do you see the colors on the hill? Remember we talked about what color the hill was?
Yeah.
And it was what color? Brown. Okay, look down in the bottom. What does the bottom look like down there? Is that brown? No, it's green. Now where does water fall? When it falls on the ground, where does water go?
Down.
Down, okay. So we have more water down in the bottom than we have up here. So these guys get thirstier. I want you guys to take your hand, hold it like this, and hold it up to the sun. Okay, can you feel heat? You have to hold it up to the sun.
Heat?
Okay, does it feel warm?
Oh, I feel wind. I have a question. I only feel wind. I feel wind.
Okay, now I want everybody to take 2 fingers, like this, and hold them up to the sun.
Oh, that's not as much.
Now you see the size of this leaf?
Oh.
Remember how we held our hand up like this? Okay, see these leaves? Each one of those little things is a leaf. Plants take up water in their roots, and it comes out and it gives water out on its leaves.
Hey, look at
So, do you think that this leaf gives more water, or do you think that this leaf gives more water?
I think the big one gets more.
That's right. Okay, so an adaptation, if you don't want to lose water, is to have smaller leaves.
December's a celebration of robots here at the Science Museum. We're in Robotville. The idea is that we're looking at robots that will be in our lives in the future.
You can see robots that are technically some of the best robots in the country and also in Europe. You can see robots like ours which are designed for interaction with real people, and you can see some robots that are actually looking way into the future, which are just mind-blowing.
So what you see here is probably the most advanced humanoid robot in terms of dexterity of the hand. As you see, the hand is very movable. It has many motors controlling the hand, and the reason is that we want to study manipulation, which is a very important skill for humans.
Everybody has a dream of having a robot in their home that goes around, picks up things, finds things for them, helps them with the cooking, does the housework. And the researchers are looking into that, but more importantly, they're looking into how we relate to robots. And they're using robots as a study tool for how we work as well.
This little device is a prototype version of a Raspberry Pi computer. It's a little tiny device that is a computer on a USB stick. It's got HDMI at one end, a USB at the other end, and the idea is you plug it into an HDMI TV, you can plug in a USB keyboard and use it as a computer to be able to learn programming, to be able to run Twitter, Facebook, whatever, but also to be able to understand the whole process of programming. A lot of things have been obfuscated in the sense that these days, in the sense that you can't get at them. There's so much between you and doing something interesting or creative that it gets in the way. And hopefully this device will be one of the pieces that helps change that.
The idea is that this would go into schools and would be cheap enough for almost every child to own, and then what would they do with it?
The idea is that they'd be 10 to 15 pounds, so that in theory they could be given away to the child. There would be other ways of funding it. What they would do with it is they would be able to engage in a lot of things that we're all consumers of, but not actually creators of. Understanding how you put together little scripts that might run on websites, that might filter, we all look at things like Facebook, like Twitter, also email, that a lot of kids are disconnected from. The wealthier kids in a class will have access to a computer at home. They'll have access to a mobile phone, but a lot of the kids won't, and this would hopefully fill that gap.
And you think that ICT in schools isn't really teaching them this kind of stuff at the moment?
In my day, we had a subject called typing, and that, to me, is what ICT has replaced. It's a fine set of skills. I'm not meaning to belittle it, but the ability to write letters, the ability to use PowerPoint, use Excel, is one set of skills. I'm talking about a completely different set of skills that actually ICT has ousted from schools. In the early days, in the 80s, we had computer science coming into schools. There were O-levels, there were A-levels. They've been largely supplanted by things like ICT. And the number of computer science applicants to universities dropped in the early 2000s by around 50%, which I think is a shocking indictment. And I personally put that down to ICT.
The word is reification. And what it talks about is there's a problem in the noun structure of English. Do you remember what you were taught about what a noun is when you were in grammar school? In America, we were taught a very specific little mantra. A noun is a person, place, or thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like almost everybody in America will just automatically regurgitate, oh, a noun is a person, place, or thing.
Yeah.
But that's just simply not true. It depends on how you want to define the word thing. See, I would say that in order for something to be a thing, then you have to be able to put it in a bucket. It may be a big bucket, like a mountain is a thing, but if you had a big enough bucket, you could put the mountain in the bucket. But words like these in this reification problem, novelty, science, judgment, compulsion, reality, tragedy, illusion, those are not things. Yeah. There is no such thing as love. There's no such thing as knowledge. Those are words, just like the word spoon is a word that refers to this thing on my desk here. And then we have these other words like knowledge and reality, but there is no thing that you can point to and say, there's humility, because it's a word of a different order of reality. It's about relationships between things, not about things themselves. But the problem is, in English, that distinction is lost. And people get into arguments about what democracy is, or what science is, or what truth is, or any of these things. See, if you and I have an argument about my spoon here, I'll bet you any argument you and I have about this spoon, if you and I were both here in the room together with this spoon, we would have no more argument. Because we will be able to resolve that argument by looking at the spoon itself and deciding what makes sense. But if we have an argument about democracy or freedom or the future or economy or any number of thousands and thousands of English words, there's no way to settle the argument because there is no thing for recourse to. Dualism, two-valued logic. We love to divide the world up into two mutually exclusive opposites. Is he a good king or a bad king, Daddy? You hear it all the time. Is it this or that? The word or is the key. They present a choice between two mutually exclusive opposites. It must be one or the other. The problem with this is, and there are some cases where the world really is divided that way, but the problem is they project this dualism out into the world as though the world itself is actually divided into good and bad, or light and dark, or whatever. When in fact, two-valued logic is an aspect of my analysis, not the world itself. The world isn't divided into good and bad people. It's my analysis that goes out there and grabs people and puts them into one box or the other. The world itself isn't divided that way. It's an aspect of the system I use to analyze the world.